Welcome back. The Western Cape High Court has delivered a significant victory for media freedom and investigative journalism by overturning a temporary gag order that had been imposed on the non-profit investigative organization Open Secrets. The gag order was initially sought by Integrated Convoy Protection, a South African armoured vehicle manufacturer, to prevent Open Secrets from publishing the findings of its investigation. Now, this investigation reportedly focused on ICP's contract to supply armoured vehicles to the United Arab Emirates and the potential implications of this arms trade, particularly concerning the extraction of South African expertise and the possible links to human rights abusers abroad. Let's chat more about this with Head of Legal at Open Secrets, Ariella Scher. Ariella, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It was Judge Erasmus who said he needed to determine whether this is a litigation by ambush. Would you say it was?
Hi, Massa. Thanks so much for having us on. We would say it was absolutely litigation by ambush, and actually what we said is that it was not in practice, but in substance, it was like an ex parte application, which is where it's litigation that's launched where we don't have a chance to speak or for the judge to hear us before such time as an interim order is granted, because there was a holding order and it existed from 3 weeks ago until it was lifted by the court yesterday.
And also, I believe you were told at the 11th hour about this.
We were given precisely 1 hour and 45 minutes between when we received the documents and we were expected to be in court with written submissions. So yes, definitely from that sense, it was ambush. But from our perspective, in any event, it was unnecessary for them to have gone to court. We're journalists. We wrote them a right of reply so that we could give them the chance to be heard. And instead of responding to the right of reply, they launched court papers.
So clearly your investigation had some quite big revelations. If you could flesh out what was in your report that made Integrated Convoy Protection want to gag you.
So we've published the investigation today. Essentially what happened is that we were approached by a whistleblower with some information and some documents relating to Integrated Convoy Protection. And as you said, they're an arms manufacturer based in South Africa. But they've currently, or they had from 2020, a very big contract to sell an armored vehicle to the UAE. What was happening is that they're selling this as what they call, it's a semi-knockdown kit. Essentially, they sell all the parts of the vehicle on this side to the UAE, and then on the other side, the contract requires them to go and assemble the vehicles. So they're selling a vehicle, and the contract itself says that they're selling a vehicle. But the arms industry is very heavily regulated, and arms manufacturers have to get permits for any arms that they're selling or trading anywhere outside of South Africa. And Integrated Convoy Protection does not have a permit to sell vehicles. They have a permit to sell parts, or at least that's what they say they have. And so that's what the investigation was about. It's saying that actually what they're selling are vehicles. They're selling them to the UAE. We know that the UAE is implicated in providing arms to the conflict that's currently happening in Sudan. So this is something of deep public interest in South Africa.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously Integrated Convoy Protection didn't want this out there. And their legal team argued that your publication would have demonstrable real risk, financial consequences, and irreparable harm to their reputation as a company. What was your reaction to hearing this legal argument, considering that Open Secrets is a non-profit organization exposing and asking for accountability for economic crime affecting the larger population?
Well, at the outset, it was surprised because, as we know, we live in a constitutional democracy, and values like transparency and accountability are what underpin our constitutional democracy. So we rely on, this is well recognized by our courts, we rely on investigative journalists and on the media in general to publish information in the public interest, to expose where it exists, criminality, but not only criminality, to expose just generally information that is relevant to the public, and particularly if it's something like a South African arms manufacturer selling arms to a country implicated in serious war crimes. We argue that's definitely in the public interest. So our first response was just surprise. But then we realized that the law is behind us, and we argued our case on the law, and thankfully yesterday the case was dismissed, which means we won.
And Ariella, speaking about the law being on your side, how and why was the first urgent application approved? And I believe there were some errors there, redacted documents. Talk us through that.
So obviously we can't speak for the judge, and I also do want to say that the judge yesterday has handed down an order, but his reasons are coming. So at the moment we don't have the court's reasoning, we only have our experience of it, and obviously the outcome being that the interdict was dismissed. Again, we don't know why the judge granted the interim holding order 3 weeks ago. Our argument is that it's because he didn't hear us. There wasn't time for him to hear us. There wasn't time for us to respond because the matter was brought on such unreasonable, urgent basis.
And just finally, Ariella, what does this judgment mean for organizations like yourself who do important investigative journalism work?
Well, it reaffirms the constitutional principle of transparency, of media freedom, and it recognizes that we all have a right to freedom of expression. That right has different components. Some of the components are the right of the public to know, but other aspects of that right is the right of the media to rely on sources, to get confidential information, and to report in the public interest. We think this is really, really important and a good moment for our constitutional democracy.
Just to squeeze this in there, Ariella, do you think this will be the last, or is that naive to think?
What we would say is that there are lots of corporations with lots of money and lots of power who have many things that they might want to hide. So I think we would be naive to expect that this is the last time, but at very least our law is settled. This is not permitted. So we will, and I'm sure our partners in the sector will keep fighting this.
Absolutely. Ariella, thank you so much for joining us this evening.